Cups of Reddit. What is the most what the duck happened here moment you've experienced? One time we got a call about a minor wreck in a highway corridor. We get there, I'm handling the accident. 100 yards down, there's a car on flats, and another further down from that, unrelated to the accident. One of the drivers walked back to us and told us a sketchy guy had been stopping at these cars to offer his help in fixing the flats. The theory was that he threw something on the road to flatten the tires so that he could help and get money from the drivers. I'm stuck at the back end of this mess on the radio trying to get another unit to detain the shady guy. All of a sudden, I look over and there's a guy in nothing but a hospital gown and an IV hanging out of his arm, just tootling along the shoulder. The nearest hospital was several miles away, so I have no idea how he covered that distance with nobody noticing. So here I am with 1. A car wreck, 2. A guy possibly flattening tires on purpose, and 3. An escaped hospital patient, all completely unrelated on a major highway late at night. What was the deal with the hospital patient? I found 3 kids one day running next to a busy highway. The oldest was 5. We finally got them identified and figured out they lived about a mile away. We got there. They were in the care of their adult 20-ish sister, while their parents were on vacation for 2 weeks. The sister decided she'd rather pop Xanax and smoke weed than deal with the kids. So she locked them in their bedroom for about 10 days, occasionally sliding food and water past the door. There were piss stains on the baseboards in the bedroom from where the kids had decided their bathroom should be. Finally, the 5-year-old had enough and figured out how to unlock the bedroom window and make a break for it. That's nowhere near the darkest stuff I've seen. We don't like to talk about it. Edit. Sorry folks, I work nights and just woke up. She went to jail for endangering a child, and as far as I know, the case is still pending. The kids were seized by CPS and held by a foster family overnight until the parents could drive home. Late to the party, but my favorite so far has got to be the tale of the UFO/aliens. I was a cop on the res for a while and had my fair share of crazies. One night, I'm out driving around and I get a call from dispatch. There's a UFO out in one of the farmers' fields. Okay, so I get to the house and talk with the guy. We know each other, he doesn't seem to be that loony. I turn my spotlight onto said field and sure as heck there's something not quite right there. It's metal and stuff. So I go bebopping through the furrows and hoping my scarediness isn't showing because this is freaky. It was an autumn night with the wind howling and clouds blowing overhead. I get closer. I have one hand on my holstered gun and the other shining my flashlight. I was rehearsing what I was gonna say to our new overlords, and then my brain finally clicks as to what the duck it actually was. A wad of those stupid Mylar balloons, all blown up and caught on some weeds. I'm talking like 20 of those duckers just chilling and scaring the bejesus out of me. I grabbed them and walked back out to the farmer. He started laughing and then I did too. I handed them over to him and got back in my squad, still shaking. The sad part was, he passes away a few years ago, and his family gave me those deflated balloons that he had kept. I have them in my basement now. Show up to a trouble unknown call. Teenage-looking girl walks out the front door as I arrive and sits on a chair in the front listening to an iPod. This was pretty disarming for me. She was clearly not distressed at all from whatever the trouble unknown was. I didn't even disturb her as I knocked on the front door. I can see an adult male through the side glass by the door. He has a look of absolute terror. As he reaches the door, a crazed-looking woman attacks him from behind, biting his shoulder like a zombie. I would later learn this is his wife. Holy duck. Dispatch, give me the channel and get me more officers here now. I open the door and the fight is on. Pull this woman off and wrestle her to the ground face down. She's very small-framed, probably 5 feet and 100 pounds max. I'm a foot taller and 80 pounds heavier. She's screaming and flailing. I grab hold of her right arm, attempting to put it behind her back for handcuffing, but she is supernaturally strong for some reason. I've got both hands on her right wrist now trying to control her, and she's not giving at all. I try pain compliance, muscle gouges, anything to give me an advantage. No response, still fighting. It felt like this was going on for a long time, but in reality, it was a few minutes. Finally, backup arrives and he immediately goes to grab her left arm, seeing what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm finally able to get a handcuff on her wrist and pin it to her back, and my partner cuffs the other wrist, but she slips out. Small frame, small hand / wrist. This happened a few times in a row, and finally, out of frustration, I yelled, "Just clamp the ducking cuff all the way down, we'll adjust it when she's under control." Finally, we get her cuffed, but she's still flailing and screaming. Other officers arrive at this point, as well as paramedics. They're unable to assess her at all, really. The husband tells us they bought some cheap weed from a sketchy dude in town, and after smoking it, she flipped out. I assume it was laced with something. He said he smoked it too, but didn't have a reaction, so who knows. We had to drive this lady up to the hospital in a patrol car. She calmed down a little, but the entire ride she was rambling about nonsense. The hospital was prepared and had several large nurses waiting, and we got her strapped down to a bed. I told the staff about the weed and said, "Good luck." When my adrenaline was gone, my forearms were so sore they felt like rocks from fighting with this tiny woman. Moral of the story: don't smoke bad weed you bought from the town crackhead. I'm taking a slightly different approach in answering this question. A couple of months ago, I got a QA, questionable activity call. It's a catch-all for anything suspicious. The caller stated she believed someone had snuck into her backyard, climbed up onto her second floor deck, and then left an imprint of their genital on her sliding door. I show up to the call about 5 minutes later, and she's mad at me because I didn't schedule an appointment to come over and her kids saw me. She didn't want her kids to think that something bad had happened. After we get past her anger towards me for showing up, she shows me the glass sliding door in question. In all fairness to the caller, there was a sizable smudge and imprint on the glass. However, the imprint looked nothing like any penis I've ever seen. In fact, the imprint looked really similar to the dead bird laying on the deck next to the door. When I pointed out the dead bird and explained my belief that no penis had been placed on her door, the caller became incredibly irate and told me she moved to our city because it was supposed to be very safe. But now she was thinking of moving away because naked people throwing dead birds at her house was more than she could handle. Realizing I would not be able to rationalize with penis bird, I left and wrote my report. Some people don't deserve to call 911. This is my uncle's story. Not a cop, but the call was sent to the fire department instead due to the strangeness. The truck was sent on a call for an unknown disturbance, which basically means anything in the world. They get sent an address, and that's pretty much it. Truck drives down the street looking for this address, and they get to the end and all they can see is an abandoned lot with nothing but bushes. Even though they can't see anyone, they have to get out and investigate. So my uncle and a couple of the guys get out of the truck and start walking around with the usual fire department, call out. They didn't hear anything for a while and were about to pack it in as another pointless prank call when my uncle walked past a bush and heard rustling. He looks over and sees a man standing kind of awkwardly behind a bush. "Hey, Mr. Fireman, did you call 911? Yes, sir." My uncle steps a bit closer and realizes how man is buck-ass naked and standing at a strange angle. He motions to another firefighter that he found the caller and goes behind the bush to begin assessing. He's a firefighter / paramedic. That's when he realizes that the man has what he refers to a ducking bunny tail on his butt. Of course, they try to get the man to explain why he had called in distress and what was going on. After a bit of avoidance, the man finally admits that he had taken a toilet brush cleaner and shoved the handle up his bum. Honestly, no idea how anyone would think this is a good idea generally. Being the enlightened individual that he is, he chose one with a hook on the end. To hang up in a bathroom? What my uncle and the other firefighters assumed was the hook had gotten stuck on something internally because they couldn't pull it out, and it caused the man significant discomfort when they tried. My uncle left the man with another firefighter getting his information and went back to the truck to call for an ambulance. Of course, at this point, he always mentions that he walked around the truck to see the rest of the company trying to silently die of laughter out of view of the bushes. When the ambulance arrives, my uncle meets them with a grin on his face and tells them to brace themselves before walking them over to the bushes. They assess the man and conclude that there is no way for them to remove the toilet brush in the field and that they have to admit him to the hospital for surgery. The only problem was that they couldn't figure out a way to get him into the gurney without causing him to move in a way that caused him more pain. They end up throwing a blanket over him and the firefighters help maneuver him in a sort of downward dog/mountain position with his bum in the air to keep the toilet brush at the right angle. At that point, my uncle decided that the fire department was done with the call and the paramedics could handle it from there and loaded up the company onto the truck. As they began to drive away, he says, they were loading this guy into the rig as we drove off, and the last thing I saw of him was that blanket falling off and that damn bunny tail of his sticking straight up in the air. My uncle did follow up on this call with a friend at the hospital. The brush was removed surgically due to the hook getting stuck on something internally and causing the man to have some serious health complications. He has way more stories due to being a working firefighter since he was 18 in Southern California, 62 today. Former cop was a rookie deputy and got this call that a man got his foot caught in a garden tiller and was bleeding profusely. It was a 20-minute drive running code, so I had time to plan out my actions. I figured the ambulance would be about 10 minutes behind me, so I was gonna tourniquet above the knee and I assumed he'd be unconscious and/or needing CPR. I get there and it's a big farm building with two guys just standing there smoking. I grabbed my medic bag, not a medic, but it had tourniquet, C-collars, gauze, etc. I run towards them to ask where the patient was, and they were white as a ghost, just smoking while pointing behind them. I went inside, and behind a big John Deere tractor was a huge PTO-driven tiller about 7 feet wide and 3 feet tall. There was my victim, with his back against the tractor tire, his left leg was sucked in the tiller and wrapped twice around it, with the sole of the shoe next to his face and toe pointing towards the left. His femur shot out underneath the tiller and was beautifully white with no blood. He looked up at me and said, "Can you help me?" Now keep in mind, I'm 21. Thought this was a garden tiller and assumed I'd be able to do something, but I was completely out of my element. 2 ambulances, the rural fire department extrication team, a welding company to cut the machine apart on scene, a helicopter, and a surgeon that came to amputate on scene. Later, he was free. I want to pass out just from hearing this story. Can't imagine how it must have been like to be there. A friend of mine is a cop in the UK and his story is more WTF as he saw it unfold, but missed how it all started. It was his first week on patrol and he was assigned to an experienced partner. They respond to a burglary in progress and are told that a nearby dog unit was on the scene already. When they arrive at the property, they hear a commotion outside that's clearly between an officer and a suspect, and they open the garden gate to assist the dog unit. What they then witness is a suspect face down on the grass, an officer stamping on the suspect's back whilst holding his arm up near her hip and shouting, "Stop resisting!" and the police dog absolutely going to town on this guy's buttocks with his teeth. The suspect is unsurprisingly struggling and resisting and then ends up kicking the dog. The dog then latches onto the guy's leg, starts ferociously tugging, pulls it off, and then runs towards the new cops on the scene with it. It turns out that was a false leg, which no one except the suspect knew at the time. And my buddy the cop said he just froze whilst trying to figure out how the hell he calls this in, and whether or not he should retrieve the man's leg from the police dog. That's at the same time a terrifying and a funny story. I bet the dog was real proud of himself. Not me, but my dad. When he was on the road years back, he got a call from a man saying he was locked in someone's closet. So he goes to the location of the call, which was a project housing unit, and knocks on the door. A man answered exclaiming, "I caught one! I caught one!" My dad has absolutely no idea what this dude means until he opens up the closet and sees a dwarf tied up in the closet. Apparently, the dwarf was going door to door for some organization, and when the psycho dude opened his door, he thought he found a leprechaun and proceeded to catch it and throw it in his closet for safekeeping. I have no words. Let's just say I've lost hope for humanity. Subscribe for more r/askReddit content.